Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. And good evening. We are going to continue with the book Life Beyond Death by Swami Atmavidyananda. This is a collection of the lectures that he gave over a long span of years. And so if you read all of them, you'll find that there are many very similar, almost word-for-word passages, because he would be giving it perhaps to a different audience and perhaps several years later, and so he goes over some of the same material. But the chapter might be titled a little bit differently, but much of the same material is in there. So if we do too many of these, I will have to do some editing. We are in the middle of, I think it was chapter 10, I remember. Yes, chapter 10, the spiritualism. And as we mentioned before, spiritualism became very popular towards the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century, when people were looking for some assurance that there was life after death, when their faith in the literal interpretation of the Bible was being shaken by various scientific discoveries. And so he personally investigated these things so that he could talk from a standpoint of personal experience rather than just hearsay or opinion. All right, so continuing where we left off. You have always the sense of I with you. When you dream, you have the sense of I within. When you are in sound sleep, you have this sense. Otherwise, you would not remember that you slept and had no dreams. You can never get rid of the sense of I unless you attain to the highest liberation or the freedom of the soul and become one with God. Then your individuality is infinite. Just as the individuality of Christ was not lost when he realized that he and his Father were one, but it became infinitely expanded. Therefore, we can never lose our individuality. Sometimes some of the souls, after passing out of the body at the time of death, contract all the forces that are scattered all over the body and come to a nucleus like an atom, and there it may lose its personality for the time being. So he's drawing the difference between personality and individuality. And he mentioned that your personality is based on the way you see yourself in this particular life, that you're a particular gender and a particular nationality and maybe a particular political party, and you have a particular kind of job, and you took certain courses in school, and you married a particular person, and you have so many kids, and so forth and so on. That's your personality, and people might describe you as having a extroverted personality or an introverted personality or judgmental personality and so forth and so on. We could go through the whole Myers-Briggs grid of personalities. But your individuality is really identified with your soul, your Atman. And when you're embodied and still in the veil of Maya, you see yourself as an individual, and your Atman seems like it's an individual. It's an individual jiva. It's identified with the jiva. But when that Atman realizes its oneness with Brahman, then, as he says here, it becomes infinite. Your individuality merges with the total infinite individuality of Brahman. The personality is subject to change and might be held in an earth-bound condition. If it has strong attachments to the relatives or the friends, and if it cannot get over these attachments, it hovers around them, remains close to them, tries to help them, to be loved by them. And it is conscious of its personality. For instance, if I build a beautiful house, and that beautiful house abounds in beautiful furniture and such things, and if I devoted most of my time in decorating that house, I become so attached to it that after death I would dislike to leave that spot, and I would like to remain there, invisible. I might not be seen by others, but my strong attachment will hold me there in that place. I would be wondering while my relatives and friends and all my dearest ones do not recognize me, and there I have to suffer. Now that is what happens when certain people who do not know that they are dead. They retain their personality. And of course, this is one of the reasons that Hindus cremate the body, because sometimes it's the body that people are attached to. And so in order to break that attachment to the body is burnt. Also, it's a type of sacrifice. The body is returned to the 5 elements from which it was built. And in so doing, then it's sacrificed back. Very much like we do with an immersion, we invoke the presence of the divine deity in a particular murti, and then we immerse it and allow it to dissolve back into the water and the muds from which it arose in the first place. At the time of the war in Europe, speaking of this would have been World War I, there were soldiers who died with the feelings of revenge, hatred, and anger in their hearts. It is a fact that after death they found that they were continuously fighting. They projected the forms of their enemies and tried to fight against them. It is a state of unrest. It is just like a state of hell. There is a worse hellish condition after the death of the soldier who fought in the battle in the spirit world than they have here. Sometimes a soul passes out suddenly when his body is blown into atoms through an explosion. The shock of that explosion is so great that the soul remains unconscious for a long time. There happens no further progress of this soul. Those who understand the spiritual laws never advocate war because we have no right to take the lives of individuals, especially of our own brethren who have come into this world to develop their conditions. Instead of helping them, we are taking their lives, cutting it short suddenly by swords and by all kinds of instruments of war. It is a terrible state of affairs, and the souls, after passing out of this body, are in a state of the unconsciousness. They do not know where they are. Then they are in an utter confusion. They need help of someone to guide them and to make them realize that they have left their bodies. They need help for restoring their lost consciousness. Often places that are haunted by people that were murdered or died some tragic death. And so they stick around and haunt the place. This is quite common. So you find that psychics can pick up on this kind of thing and tell you what has happened and why this soul has been trapped there. And sometimes they can help the soul to transition, make them realize that they don't need to stick around anymore. A story now comes to mind of what was supposed to have been a communication from one of the residents of that city, Los Angeles, who passed away in 1913. He was a Supreme Court judge, and he was supposed to communicate with this world through some friends. It was a very terrible condition for the particular woman whom he met in the other world and whom he knew in this material world. She was living in a boarding house, and after she passed away, she was still living in a boarding house, and she was eating beefsteak, meat, and potatoes, but did not like the coffee. The coffee was very poor, and she grumbled. She said, "It is terrible. I cannot sit at the table with the same friends, and potatoes are not very good." But still, she was hungry, and she ate. Now that gives you the idea of what we can do when we are in the earthbound condition. She did not realize that she had passed away, but she thought that she was still living. She thought it was funny that she did not have the same or better friends than she had here in this world. That shows that we take all our desires with us after death, and we manufacture these objects of enjoyment by our thoughts. The realm beyond death is the realm of the realized objects of enjoyment by our thoughts. The realm, I think I skipped a line here. The realm beyond death is the realm of the realized ideals or of the realized thoughts. If we think of a piece of bread, the bread is there, and we will eat. If we feel hungry, we are eating. If we think of coffee, we are drinking coffee. Thus we see how important it is for us to understand this, that if we die with the attachment to any particular kind of food or any particular kind of clothes or jewels or anything in this life, we carry that attachment with us. And with our desire, we manufacture those things out of the finer material in the spirit world. And you find these tendencies in people as they're reborn. When you're reborn, you often come back with the desires that you left the body with. And so you find yourself inexplicably, apparently, that you desire these things. You have no idea why you do, but you just do. John Dobson used to tell a story about a person that he took care of in her dying years, and he said, you couldn't get her past a French restaurant without her stopping in, and she, especially if it had an outdoor seating arrangement. It was just something she absolutely had to do. So similar things like that. So if you find yourself suddenly attracted to something, perhaps when you're a young kid, you watch the Olympics for some time, and you suddenly see the diving episode, the diving competition, and you think, oh, that's what I want to do. Well, it's probably because you did some of that in a previous life. You didn't get great at it, but you wanted to be great, and so now you've got that desire. Or perhaps you hear a great clarinetist playing on the TV or at a concert, and it's like, oh, I've got to learn how to play the clarinet. So we come back with these desires that we left our previous life with. There's an interesting case on YouTube of this young girl who had all these strange propensities as a very young girl. First of all, she rarely talked. The parents thought there was something wrong with her, but she showed a great ability to put makeup on. Nobody taught her. She just knew how to do it at a very young age. And she was obsessed with old Hollywood. She would look at all sorts of pictures. And one day she brought a picture to her mother, and she says, Mother, I was this person. And she could tell you all about her. And somebody was writing a biography of a person that she knew, and she went and talked to him and verified all sorts of things that he was doing. So these fascinating cases where people come in, and these rare cases where people actually remember why. She had been a child actress, and she died at a very tragically young age from exhaustion, basically. This is when the studios worked people to death, and it was silent films. It was that early. And so she was a silent film star, and she had done something like, I can't remember, like 12 pictures in 14 months or some ridiculous thing at the age of, 13 and 14. And so she just had all those tendencies. Instead of progressing and casting off these first conditions, which are narrow and which limit the progress of the souls, we take them with us and continue to enjoy them until we go to sleep and wake up. If our good thoughts and good deeds would help us, then we could go on progressing. But many of the departed spirits remain in that state of delusion for a long time. Our time does not affect the spirits. 1,000 years may be 5 days to them, because ours is according to our standard and theirs according to theirs. So no one can say how long a soul will remain in a particular condition. But it is important that we should remember the law that we create our future, we create our destiny, and we build our character by our thoughts and deeds. So, and it's also very important to, you could say you rehearse your death so that you constantly think that when you're dying, you are going to be doing jopam, you're going to remember your chosen ideal, and you're going to set aside all your desires. You're going to have complete renunciation. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be completely lifeless in this life. You can have all sorts of interests and activities and hobbies and so forth, but you have to always keep in mind that these are just temporary amusements, and when you die, you're not going to have them anymore, and you don't want them anymore. You have to develop that kind of detachment. Just like when you go into a movie, you don't expect the movie to go on forever. That would be pretty boring. There's some movies like that. But you practice being detached from anything that you're enjoying now. Just remember that it's not going to last forever. It is not that we suddenly get transformed and grow wings, but it is the continuity of this present life. Life after death means the continuity of this life, only on another plane. But it is not a place. There is no space relation. It is like a wheel within a wheel. Just as you can hear the vibrations of different musical instruments, one can be of low vibration and another of high, and both can exist without interfering with each other. At the same time, you can hear both. Similarly, around the earth, there is a spirit world. It is like the fourth dimension. It is on another plane. All that exists here is this material plane. All that exists here in this material plane do not exist there because the space relations do not exist there. I remember when we were kids, my sister and I were listening to one of those angel chimes, you know, where the candles turn the little wheel and the little dingle-dangles cling-clang on the little chimes. And she was a soprano and I'm a bass. And so we asked each other, what pitch do you hear those chimes singing? And she heard the highest overtone, and I heard the lowest one, because that's what we were used to tuning into. When you're singing in a choir, you have to listen for your note, and I always listen for the lowest note, and she always listens for the highest note. And so you can tune in to a different frequency. So those who have firm belief and belief in a heaven where the angels sing the praises of the Lord, where there would be peace like the peace on Sunday in a city, when everything is closed. That's talking a century ago, how things closed down on Sunday. Even in my childhood, there were not that many stores open on a Sunday. Where everything is closed, or in a peaceful church, and those who believe in things like these will find them there. Because all the human beings are attached to those dreamlike states which we call heaven. And there are many such heavens. The Mohammedans who believe in the horse and the drinking of wine and having fine air and plenty of shade, and if he holds that as an ideal, will go to a plane of consciousness where he will project all these ideas and make his own heaven. So you see this idea, this is a very good interfaith idea, that all of these concepts that different faith traditions have of a heaven are in some sense true, because they create those conditions. And so if you're picturing yourself going to a heaven that's filled with beautiful trees and flowing water and abundance of fruits and wines and all sorts of nice things, which is very common in the Islamic tradition because most of them come from desert climates. And so they're really interested in having a beautiful garden with lots of water and so forth. Then that's what you will create for yourself when you pass away. So I don't know if he does it here, but there's one place where he says, I come from a country where it rains 400 inches a year, so having a lot of water isn't what I dream of. Anyway, but these conditions are not eternal. They are like dream states. There are many such heavens. Each nation and each particular tribe among different nations had held a certain belief of what they would enjoy after death in a celestial realm. For instance, the Red Indians, who has his belief in a hunting ground, goes to heaven like the hunting ground. He believes he believes in that old Scandinavian going to Valhalla, where he would sit in front of Odin and he would fight with his other friends. And during the fight, he would be wounded and then miraculously healed of his wounds. That's actually the kind of myth they have in the old Viking Scandinavian countries, not currently, but in the old days. That was their idea of heaven, was having a great battle. They were really warrior-type people. And the Native Americans would talk about going to the happy hunting ground. They wouldn't say they went to heaven, they went to the happy hunting ground. Then they would run and chase a wild boar and have a big feast, and this would continue every day throughout eternity. Some will find peace that way, but not through eternity. I have mentioned already that eternity is a long time, and even millions of years are not to be considered as eternity. Eternity means time without end and without beginning. It is just like a circle. Eternity forms always a circle. All progress must go up to a certain point, and then it will come back again. Some go to heaven suddenly at the time of their expiration of the celestial happiness. At the time of the expiration of their celestial happiness, their other desires will wake up, which are dormant for the time being, and those will bring them down to this plane again. They will be born again as human beings. Now, you need not get frightened about it, for they had such desires. There is no one who forces them, but it is their desires. They are creating their own conditions. That is the law. No one punishes the wicked. No one rewards the virtuous, but the soul rewards and punishes itself as a result of its own thoughts and deeds. We gravitate. You are here because you have the desire to come to this world and enjoy certain pleasures and gain certain experiences, which you would not get anywhere else. The same conditions prevail after you have gone to heaven. You will come back here again and will gain some new experiences. And this is a great blessing that it is so. Otherwise, it would be a very monotonous state of affairs to play on that same harp. I would not enjoy that. You might enjoy because you have been trained to believe that it is a higher state. Have you ever played a harp? You know, they have these pictures of heaven, and people are just playing this harps like this. You don't just go like this. It is really tough. Those strings are really hard, and you have to have really strong fingers. When I was a little kid, there was a show called Life with Elizabeth, and it started with a harpist playing. And you could see her bulging muscles in her arms. She had a lot of muscles to play that harp. It is not something that you just strum like this, so it's nothing. Anyway, I was fortunate to know 3 harp players in school. I thought that was awfully unusual. How many harpists are there in the world? And at Hollywood High, we had 3 harpists. So the condition is that after death, we continue to live and go through different realms where we develop certain powers, and each of them contain the potentialities and the possibilities. You must not think 70 years and 10 in one plane have finished your manifestation. It could not be. The Christians have taught that the Lord created them at the time of their birth, and they came suddenly out of nothing, and they will continue to live forever. That is not possible, because the eternal life does not mean that it has a beginning at one end, and at the other end it is endless. It has already been said that you cannot imagine a stick which you are holding at one end, and the other end would go on to eternity and be endless. No, because what has a beginning must have an end. That is the law of nature. No one can imagine a thing having a beginning but no end. Some think that the physical body can be kept throughout eternity, but that is impossible, because that which has birth must die. Of course, it may go through a transformation, but it would not be the same body, just as we do not possess the same body which we had when we were babies. The baby body is changed into the young body, and then into the mature body, because every 7 years, every molecule of your body is renewed. You have not the same brain, same sense of sight, same sense of hearing. It is constantly changing. But in the midst of these changes, there is something unchangeable. And unless you realize that something, you cannot expect to have permanent peace and happiness, because in the midst of all the changes, you remain as the center around which all the changes are going on like a whirlpool. You are the same conscious entity which can never die. So have faith in yourself that you are immortal. By immortality is meant eternal life, both beginningless and endless. No one has created you, and no one could create you out of nothing. God himself could not also create, but he projects everything from within. So you exist first as a part of God, and you have come here in this world through experience and manifested your powers, and again you are going back to God. Thus you complete the cycle. It is the play of the divine forces of nature, and you are only their manifestation. Each individual unit of the self-conscious entity will realize its infinite nature by going through a great many manifestations, either in this cycle or in the cycle to come. One of the questions that we were asked, or that I was asked on the interfaith panel last week, was if you could be reborn in an animal body. And there are differences of opinions in that, but it generally seems like it's rare, but probably possible in a couple of instances. One would be if someone has particularly beastly tendencies, and so they need to be in an animal body to get those beastly desires out of their system. But another might be an inordinate affection for a particular type of animal, as the story in the Upanishads about the man who is very fond of his deer, and at passing away, he was very worried about his deer. And so that was the last thing he thought about, and so he ended up being reborn as a deer. Sometimes when I see how pampered pets are, you think maybe some people came back as pets because they wanted to be pampered. Can be a pretty luxurious life, and although some pets, of course, don't have that, but if you're born into the right household, you can be a very pampered pet. All right, you must understand that the soul can come down from the heavenly plane to this plane of consciousness and be born again with more developed powers, either to gain new experiences or to help others to gain knowledge. There are certain souls who are perfected and who came down consciously, remembering all that they have gone through. They remember it all, and they have come down through sheer joy, as it were, to help humanity and set an example, like Christ or Buddha or other saviors. But we do not have that power. We gravitate, being forced by our past deeds. For instance, we have the desire to be one of the best artists, and before I realize my ideal, if I suddenly pass away, I think that my desires have gone for nothing. But that is not true, because they will bring me back again and put me in the proper environment through the proper channel so that I could realize my ideal of the artist once more. That is a great comfort that it is so. One plane of life is not enough. We have been told that everything was fixed before we came to this plane. But how can one individual understand or know everything of this world, of infinite phenomenon, unless they have infinite lives? Oh, I should tell you another story. My sister had a friend who had a talking parrot, and this parrot did not parrot. It talked. It talked in intelligent sentences. It was asked if it wanted potatoes to eat, and it says, with butter. When my sister visited, the persons who owned the pet said, do you like Auntie Mary? And he says, I don't know yet. And when she left, the parrot said, I love Auntie Mary. This is a strange bird. One of their more psychic friends thought it might be her grandfather that had come back to live with her. She had no children, so how else would you come back to live with a relative? For that reason, the teachings of Vedanta are in perfect harmony with nature. It does not condemn any such ideas, but it puts them in their proper places. Some people have dreams of heaven, and they will go there. But if we are told that this heaven is an eternal state, we are hearing a statement that cannot be true. We must realize that the life after death is the continuation of the present life, and we make our future according to our thoughts and deeds. We are the creators of our destiny, of our character, and of our future, and we will continue to live and come back and be born again on this earth or on some other planet. We may go to some other planet where there are different conditions, and we may develop up the infinite realm of this universal spirit. There is no end of experiences, but a perfected soul reaches that state where there is no more birth, no more death, and no more disease, sorrow, or suffering. There reigns the absolute peace and happiness, perfect knowledge, and wisdom, which are the highest goal of human life. Very interesting that he would have that concept that there are beings on other planets back in 1910 or 20, whenever he was giving this talk. Must have been after World War I, so probably 1920. Now, of course, it's almost certain when you think of the number of galaxies and the number of stars and the number of planetary systems, even though the number of special conditions that have happened on Earth to develop life seem quite extraordinary. When you have that many chances, it's probably happened to other places too. For example, we have a relatively large magnetic core because we were bombarded by another smaller planet-sized object, and the two iron cores merged, and the lighter stuff went off to form the moon. If we didn't have such a large magnetic core, we wouldn't have as strong a magnetic field around the Earth, and the cosmic rays would be stronger, and so there'd be a little bit more difficult to have life as we know it. And the atmosphere might have gotten thinner by being stripped away by the solar winds and so forth and so on. So, and of course we had to be in just the right position, not too far and not too close to the sun, and just about the right size so that the amount of gravity was just about right. So there are a lot of different special conditions. And having the moon stabilized our rotation. Without the moon, the rotation would not be as stable, and the climate situation would not be as stable. It's not terribly stable even as it is. When you look at geological history, you see that we're living in a Goldilocks zone where for, these, in geological times, we're talking about millions of years. But the Earth has gone through a lot of times when it's been a lot colder and a lot hotter. And we're living in one of the lucky periods where it's in between those two extremes. We're not an ice ball like it's been many times, and it's not quite warm where there's no ice at all. So we're probably wrecking that nice Goldilocks period, but somehow life will probably survive. Just depends on in what form. All right, so that ended that chapter. And we have a few more minutes, but I didn't have time to go through this to see how much of this is going to be a repeat, but we'll start it anyway. It's called Spiritualism and Vedanta. The Gita says, the Supreme Lord says, the votaries of the gods or angels go to the gods. To the ancestors go the ancestor worshippers. The spirit worshippers go to the spirits. But those who are devoted to me attain me and reach perfection. So that gives you in a nutshell why you want to think of spiritual things when you're passing away. And the chances of you thinking of spiritual things when you pass away is greater the more spiritual things you think about. You can't expect to think about all sorts of other things for 60, 70, 80, 90 years, and then on your deathbed suddenly realize you need to think about God. You need to be thinking about spiritual things predominantly in your life. And so that's why we do spiritual practices on a daily basis. Modern spiritualism claims to have a supernatural origin, like all our other great religions of the world, which have been founded upon the supernatural revelations. It has played the most important part in toning down the dogmas of the Christian theology and reforming the religious belief of the vast majority of the American people, and in starting fresh inquiries and investigations in the realm beyond the grave. Within the last 50 years, modern spiritualism has given wonderful demonstrations regarding the existence of disembodied spirits who continue to live even after the dissolution of their gross material forms. It has brought comfort and consolation to the hearts of many people who were suffering from the evil effects of skepticism and unbelief concerning a future life, caused by the dry theories of the atheistic, agnostic, and materialistic thinkers of the last century. Through the help of modern spiritualism, many of the educated and uneducated people of this country have now arrived at the conviction that there is such a thing as the human soul, or a conscious entity which continues to exist after the death of the physical body. Modern spiritualism has taught that the souls of the dead are not destined to suffer eternally, but that they are comfortably situated and do not forget their earthly friends and relatives. On the contrary, like the guardian angels, they watch over their beloved ones and are always anxious to help them and protect them from the dangers and misfortunes that surround their earthly lives. Modern spiritualism has taken away the horror of the post-mortem condition of life that has enabled the human minds to look upon death as the threshold of that wonderland, the inhabitants of which enjoy new lives, new experiences, and renewed pleasures and happiness. Thus, having established a belief in the life after death, modern spiritualism has claimed to lay the foundation of a religion under the direction of those spirits who have control over the mediums, or of those wise spirits who visit the spiritualistic seances, whether private or professional, with a desire to enlighten the minds of the sitters by imparting the knowledge of supernatural things. The attempt of modern spiritualism for establishing religion upon the experiences gathered through communications of the departed spirits remind us of those ancient times when the primitive races were groping in the darkness of ignorance, and their minds were struggling hard to see a ray of light in that thick mist which veiled the realm beyond the threshold of death. In fact, the study of modern spiritualism leads us back to that age when the religion of the primitive tribes consisted in keeping up the memory of their dead relatives and friends. Then, after seeing the ghost-like apparitions of the deceased, they came to believe that their ancestors were alive, even when their bodies were moldering in the grave. It also takes us back to that age when the principal form of worship was to please the departed ancestors' spirits by doing such acts as they had liked most during their earthly careers. That kind of ancestor worship was the ancient form of spiritualism. and many scholars of modern times maintain that it was the beginning of all religions that are supposed to have a supernatural origin. The ancestor worship, of course, as we all know, means a belief in the spirits of the departed ancestors and the supernatural powers which they possess, as well as our constant remembrance of them and our service in their memory, either by following their directions or by seeking to rouse their sympathy and kindly feelings so that they may help us during the distress and misfortunes of our earthly lives. This ancestor worship is to be found in almost all the religions of the world. After studying the ancient religions of different countries, we find clear traces of this old form of spiritualism among the ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, Chaldeans, Assyrians, Chinese, Parsis, Hindus, and other races inhabiting different parts of the world. The ancient Egyptians, like the modern spiritualists, believed in the departed spirits. Their idea was that within the physical body of man there was a soul having the shape of the gross body in every respect and with smaller hands, feet, and other limbs. It was like the double or the counterpart of the physical man. When the physical man died, the counterpart or double went out of the body and lived. The life of the double, according to the Egyptian belief, depended upon the condition of the material body. That is, so long as the gross form remained intact, the form of the double would remain perfect. But if any part of the dead body was mutilated or injured, then the similar part of the double would also be mutilated or injured. It was for this reason that they cared so much to preserve the dead bodies by making mummies and building pyramids. This belief was the fundamental principle of spiritualism and the ancestor worship of the ancient Egyptians. And it's interesting, there have been some of these past these people that experience remembrance of their past life. They will sometimes have birthmarks or wounds or some sort of deformity that corresponds to the injury that caused them the death in the previous life. So if they were shot in the back, they may have a birthmark in the shot in the back, and so forth. So there's some evidence to support this idea, although it's not what the Egyptians were thinking, because you didn't have to maintain the physical body in between. But the subtle body retains some of those marks or some scars of the way the person died before. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon that's happened. There's a whole section in that book that I mentioned last time, The Irreducible Mind, on evidences that came from previous lives in people's physical form. The Babylonians and the Chaldeans also believed in the departed spirits, but not exactly in the same manner as the Egyptians did. They believed in the wandering shade of the dead, which was called Ikimu, that is, a specter. It was like the shape of the physical man with a similar form, but they thought it would meet with great misfortune if the dead body were not buried with proper ceremonies. So they observed a great many ceremonies in order to make the departed soul free from all misfortunes. The Babylonians believed that the souls of those dead bodies, which were not buried with proper ceremonies, could not enter the house of the dead, called Arulu. That is, the underground abode of the dead. It was like the Sheol of the Hebrews. Therefore, the Babylonians, Chaldeans, and Assyrians took special care to bury the dead. The embodying of the dead body, the building of monuments and tombstones, and decorating of them with flowers, wreaths, flags, and other grave offerings, which are practiced today by the Christian nations in Europe and America, are but the remnants of the ancient ancestor worship of the ancient Babylonians and Chaldeans. These customs have been handed down to us, and we are now blindly following them without knowing their meaning. However, there's one thing that's not quite accurate. We did, embalming is fairly common in the United States, but it was not common, interestingly enough, until the Civil War, when there were so many dead bodies that they couldn't bury them fast enough. And so rather than having them rotting and smelling, they embalmed them so that they wouldn't putrefy in public view. So before that, when people could be buried quickly, there was no need to embalm them. But during the Civil War, embalming became fashionable, and then it was, once you've got an industry that promotes it, then it becomes fashionable. And so people started doing it more religiously. So we can continue this next time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.